everybody. Good to connect with everyone. Welcome to the very first live stream. This is Brian. Looking forward to this. And today we are tackling this big level topic about what's it going to take to build a brand that investors will get behind. Perhaps maybe you have grand aspirations of selling your brand, not today, but maybe in the long term. And what exactly are these global organizations looking for? And I would argue that the investors or those that are potentially acquiring you are looking at similar metrics. So we're going to dive into that today. In particular, I'm going to share a deck from a larger organization, and they're going through the acquisition of a smaller brand, and they share some of the key components that they're looking for. And I thought it'd be a really good exercise to do that so that you can start to consider what you need to do today for a small startup so that you can make that transition in a very smoother, or at least relatively smooth process. We've got lots to cover. If this is your first time here, my name is Brian and it's good to meet you. I've been in the supplement space since 2004, specializing in regulatory affairs and quality assurance. And it's been a whirlwind for sure. And I've been helping a lot of these established brands, young and not so young, comply with FDA and FTC. And it's been quite an adventurous journey because we're seeing a lot of these established brands looking for investment. They're looking for a cash injection, or they're perhaps looking for a buyout. And they are definitely running into issues. And I've been working with several of them last year as well as this year as part of these exercises to make sure their compliance are all straight, ready to go so that these transactions can happen fairly smoothly. So let's dive into it. Let's look at this deck here. So this is Jameson Wellness. And in this particular deck, they're acquiring a brand called U Theory brand. Now, if you don't know Jameson Wellness, they're a fairly large organization. They're really, really big up in Canada. I've seen them in the store shelves. They just take aisles upon aisles on the supplement aisle there. And they're a large global organization. They have a footprint in the US as well, and other countries. And they're looking to acquire U Theory. So let's look into what exactly that they're looking for. I'm not going to go through all of these slides just because there's a lot here. And I should say that that my expertise is compliance, like quality assurance, FDA, FTC compliance, whereas there's going to be a lot of financial information here and acronym, and I try my best to keep up with it, but I am not the expert, but we'll make do, okay? All right, so first things first, U Theory. Who are they? They're a brand started in 2010. And you can see what their mission is, essentially selling high quality supplements to help people improve their health, beauty, and happiness. Further to that, they're a leading premium supplement lifestyle brand focused on the US market with 200 employees. Now, the takeaway here is there's nothing really special about this. This seems fairly generic, but there's a reason behind that. And we're going to dive into why that is the case. Some key metrics: US, $114 million in revenue, EBITDA of $21 million, and 19% EBITDA margin. Now, this is an EBITDA figure. And one thing I want to highlight, or two things. Number one, the amount of revenue. Now, obviously, we're not anywhere near the $100 million mark now. But just know that it took this company, 10 years approximately to get there. So you can think of what your trajectory could look like, or at least help you build out your business case. The other takeaway here is this 19% EBITDA margin. It does not factor in the taxes and interest and other administrative costs. And we're only at less than 19%. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there are a lot of people that are thinking that there are huge margins in the supplement space. And maybe for a very small brand, there could be, if your operation is fairly small, at least initially, it could be fairly healthy. But those margins, they don't go that far as you build your company, as you build expansion and distribution. And as you can see here, 19% is like a figure that they're happy with. All right, that just gives you a sense of where should your margins be when you're building out your supplement brand. Okay, moving on. So here we dive into some of the acquisition criteria. The first one being over $100 million in sales. Yes, I realize you're not there, but again, it just gives you a sense of what you want to aspire to, right? This is that North Star. Required internal rate of return of 20%. This ability to expand into geographical footprint in mature vitamin, mineral, and supplement markets such as the USA, Western Europe, etc. This is an interesting point about this expansion internationally, moving into other new markets. And again, we're going to dive into why this is key. This is key and so important for your brand. And leading to that is this idea of this quality brands with mass consumer appeal and broad category penetration. These two kind of go hand in hand. And this is the thing. You want a brand with potential consumer, like mass consumer appeal. That's the call out here. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because typically when we're starting, and I encourage everyone to do this, when you're starting, we all know the supplement industry is so competitive. And the goal here, at least the initial part, is to niche yourself down or niche yourself down, right? So specific that you essentially find your blue ocean where you have no competitors or little competitors. And so you need to do that tactically now. But the goal is in the future, you need to somehow transition to this mass consumer appeal component and to have this broad category penetration. This is key. This is something that a lot of these large organizations are looking for. And we'll go into why in a bit. And this last component around significant synergies available in Jamieson's industry, such as supply chain, innovation, consumer insights. So yeah, there's two parts of this discussion here, in my opinion. Okay, the first one is there is value with this acquisition from a Jamieson perspective because they've got leverage, they've got negotiation power, they've got the right connections, they've got the right expertise, maybe to innovate the brand in a different way. Maybe they can market it in a different way. They've got more funding, and they also have stronger negotiation power, so they can negotiate lower costs for ingredients, as an example, or a different manufacturing supply chain. So there's definitely ways to get value out of this acquisition from a Jamieson's perspective. The other component of synergy, like the other unspoken part of synergy, is redundancy, right? You don't need two finance departments, you don't need two IT departments. So obviously the extra cost to run those from Youtheory probably be removed in the longer term. Okay, I don't know if that's the case now. I'm not saying that that is the case now, but it could happen. Won't be the first time. Okay, so when it comes to transaction summary, first thing here, $210 million buyout. Okay, and this is, I smile because this is the payday that we're looking for. Yes, when we're starting a supplement brand, we may be thinking about, it's all about the sales, the monthly sales. You can get pretty healthy stream of income that way, no doubt. But there's something to be said about, we wanted to start our own business to escape the rat race, right? But all we're doing is we're really moving to a different rat race, right? The entrepreneurial rat race where you're putting in long hours, there's a lot of risk you're carrying. And so, yes, you're making your own money, you don't report to anyone, but there's a lot of stress involved in growing a supplement brand. And really this buyout, that's the real escape from that rat race, right? And that's really ultimately where a lot of entrepreneurs want to go. Not necessarily saying that you have to go there. I'm just saying, like, if you build this right, that could be in your future. And of course, it's probably in your nature to look for that next thing, right? There are some conditions in terms of performance for fiscal 2025 here. And then last thing I want to talk about on this slide is, you see here in the closing component, this is subject to customary closing conditions, regulatory approvals, and third-party consents. So one of the things to factor in here is the due diligence component. So if you're looking for investment, a cash injection, or a buyout like this, well, guess what? The investors also have their compliance experts. They have their lawyers, and they're going to ask you for your test results, your QA program, all your SOPs, your C of A's. They're going to ask you for all this. They're going to look at your label claims. They're going to look at your formula. They want to know, what was your rationale? How did you substantiate your formula, the amounts and the claims, all of these things. It's part of their due diligence exercise. All right. Now, I think historically, if you rewind 10, 15 years ago, a lot of the entrepreneurs may have done fairly well, sold a company for, $500 million. And they've really focused in on the business side, the finance, the sales side of things. And they kind of forgot about compliance, right? Because, they're breaking to new markets. It's super exciting and the brand is super sexy. And then they sell. That was a while ago. I think investors now are much more smarter, and they've realized if you just buy a brand and they don't have all those other legality issues and liability issues sorted, you may be walking into a not so great deal at the end of it. And so what they want to do is they want to make sure that you have all your compliance stuff sorted. And I've seen it where it's not sorted. And there's two options there. Either the established brand would call someone in like myself to help fix that all up, and we try to do it as quickly as possible before that due diligence exercise happens, or the deal falls apart. All right, so we're trying to avoid that scenario by bringing this to light now. And ideally, and the goal with all of this is to kind of build that foundation now so that it's not a strong or significant pivot if you had to, for a company that's never done compliance before. All right, let's keep going. Now, these are just some, I think a lot of this is repeated in terms of, what they're looking for. I just want to highlight a couple things here. U-Theory does have their own US manufacturing capabilities. I'm curious to see if they actually use it, but it's nice to know that they have it. But here, you've got strong marketing expertise with a track record of successful campaigns. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, when we're starting out, the way we sell products is going to be different than how Jameson is going to sell products. They're in the traditional advertising space and branding and how a brand feels and the consumer perception. Yes, we do that as a small startup, but at the same time, I would argue that we have to come up with different tactics that are more direct to consumer, that direct response idea, mailing lists, influencers, affiliate programs, all these things. And ultimately, this idea of you having a really strong sense of what your consumers are looking for is key. They need that. That way they can build their advertising across with that in mind. And the last thing here, again, this idea of synergies, I think that they definitely look forward to that because they know they can then cut the expense cost for U-Theory and as a result see better margins. I'm going to skip this one. This slide, continued strong fundamentals. Just something to keep in mind here. What are they looking for? Favorable demographic tailwind, a shift towards preventive nutrition and healthcare. The informed consumer demands high quality and science-backed offerings. Yeah, and again, this is the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are new to the supplement space or starting their own product or formulating in their heads, and even brands that I'm working with now that maybe established a few years ago, they are technically science-backed, but in the sense that they're using, studies where maybe they found in the study like a signaling pathway to block cancer, right? Something like that. And they found like a plant molecule that can reduce inflammation in rats. The problem is that technically, yes, it's scientifically backed, but it's not meeting the standards of FDA and FTC, right? They're looking for human clinical studies. And that's very different. And not every ingredient has that or can meet that bar. And it's really important that we know what science-backed offering really means. And in my world, it means that it satisfies the definition of FDA, FTC, so that essentially when the due diligence exercise happens, you're ready to go. Next one is continuous search for the it ingredient. Yeah, innovation is so key. Finding, keeping up with trends, but finding new ingredients, but also like different dosage forms of the ingredients or different delivery methods of the ingredients. There's different ways to innovate. And it could be also as simple as talking about the product, about your ingredients in a different way. Now this slide is just showing you the just a general snapshot of their portfolio. And when you look at this, right, they've got their general wellness, beauty and college, emotional wellness. There's nothing like, oh my gosh, this is so groundbreaking, right? Like you can see how broad these categories are, and for the most part, pretty generic. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we want to make sure that you've got that consumer mass appeal. Like that's important. But I also encourage you, when you're thinking about launching your product, typically the client is looking at formulating one, maybe three products, right? At least due to budget. And they're so focused on the one product. The point here is it's important to think your business isn't just one product. Your business should be thinking about a portfolio of products, and it should be broken down into categories. It could be, and the categories can be up to you. It could be like this, like health functions, right? How it helps the body. It could be time, like morning, afternoon, night. It could be a pricing tier, cheap, medium, and premium, right? So there's so many ways to do this, but it's really important to kind of build out what that portfolio could look like 5 years from now. Of course, you're not going to launch with all of these products, but then the one that you want to launch today, where does that fit in that portfolio from a pricing standpoint, from a branding standpoint? Is it the flagship product? Is it not? What is it? And it's important to just look at it and see how your portfolio can expand. And if your portfolio can't expand because you're so niched down, well, that's a moment to step back and think about this and think about your branding and all that stuff. And the reason why is because of this, right? What we're seeing today. Here is Youtheory's, just some other activities that they do to give back to society. I think this is great. I think this is one way for brands to differentiate themselves. It also gives consumers another reason to buy your supplements. And I also think it kind of insulates you a little bit, because not every brand startup can do this. But if you can at least find a way to differentiate yourself even, a little bit more, that's even better. And this is just one way of doing it. Maybe there are special causes that you want to support. There are values of your brand that you want to emphasize and give back to society. This is a good way to do that. Okay, I've been talking all day. This is a slide just about Youtheory's manufacturing. Obviously, this probably doesn't apply to the vast majority of you, but you can see that they're NSF certified, USP, GMP, all the good stuff there. Okay, I want to spend some time on this slide. So, why does a Jameson want a brand, right? They can create their own formulas, they can copy the formula. What is it? It's this. It's this ability to expand your brand or the Youtheory brand into all these other channels. That's where they see the dollar signs. And that's because they have really good connections, right? They have good connections with the Costco's, the Sam's Clubs, the CVS's of the world. They know how to get product in there. They've already got all their people doing that right now. And they see Youtheory, small brand, to get into this. You need to know the right people, but you also need a lot of funding behind it to make this happen, and the logistics of it all, right? The trucks, the ships, all of those things need to be on point. The distribution center, all of that. Jameson's already got that, and it's all they see is an opportunity to bring Youtheory into all of these channels, and they see dollar signs. Okay, and so the takeaway here is twofold. Number one, it kind of goes back to the importance of the mass appeal. How do you bring your niche product that's today, how do you turn that into a mass appeal product where the average Walmart consumer will buy your product, right? Where the average Costco buyer would be interested in buying your product. That's number one. Number two is, making sure it's within this price range. That's like the other thing. And then I'll add one more, and that is these retailers, they've kind of smartened up because of litigation activity and compliance issues and all that stuff. They've smartened up and have their own compliance team. A Costco will have their own compliance team. A Whole Foods has their own compliance team. They're going to look and ask for your formula, your ingredients. They're going to ask for the GRAS status, whether it's permitted or not. They're going to ask how you substantiate the claims. They have testing programs, like CVS has their own testing programs. They look at your batch production records. They have a litany of compliance people looking at your products. So that third point here is, again, you have to make sure that your product can get into the stores. All right. Yes, they're going to see the dollar signs, but then that's kind of why all that compliance stuff plays a really active role. Like I said, maybe this wasn't the case 10 years ago, but it's definitely the case now. And again, that's driven largely in part by the enforcement, not necessarily at the FDA level or FTC level. Yes, some of that's happening, but also the litigation level. And a lot of clients are like, well, what's FDA going to do really, like in the grand scheme of things? Are they really going to come knocking on my door? Sometimes they could, depending on your brand and how egregious your claims are. But the other enforcers, and a more realistic enforcer, are your distribution channels, are your retailers, whether online, like the Amazons of the world, or like a retail level. Okay. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, making sure, how do you create your formula so it can easily transition into this scenario? Even if today you're probably like, Brian, it doesn't matter. I have no plans on getting my product into these stores today. I get it. I'm just saying, probably 5 years from now, you're probably thinking about that. And there's a reason why that's the case. And to that, I'm going to get to why. I'm just moving to this slide here. And this is just around the strong marketing expertise, right? Like the youth theories of the world, they'll know how to speak to their consumers. They know what words to use to really connect with their consumers. They know who's following them. They know what influencers to use. And obviously, you want to pay into your advertising and social media and all these things. The thing here is that it's super expensive, right? If you really want to do this right, you're spending a few $100s a day, right? Influencers are really expensive. Affiliates. Well, how much do you guys think an affiliate's going to cost you, right? 10%, 20%, 30%, maybe more of your price. It's a lot, right? And it eats into everything. And the point here is, yes, you need to have strong marketing, but my call out here is it's really expensive to acquire a buyer, which is why chances are a brand transitions and becomes both. They become omni-channel. They want both direct to consumer and also retail. And they want retail because it's cheaper, right? Like to get the cost of the sale, right? Like in order for me to get one buyer, it's going to cost you X dollars from an advertising affiliate or influencer cost. But here, if you want to get to Walmart, that's 1,500 stores, one sale, boom, you're in all those stores, right? Of course, that's oversimplifying everything, but you get a sense of what the natural journey would be in time. Okay. This last slide is just around like international expansion. They're looking at Asia Pacific, and I don't think these are what does the size of the market look like? 54 billion, etc. I don't think it's easy to get into international markets, especially if you want to do it the proper way. Typically, there's formulation changes. Every country has their own rules. Labeling changes, distribution issues, shipping costs are completely different. Regulatory approvals might be a thing. Launch times would be impacted. And as a result, you're looking at pretty significant formula. It's changes. It's practically a new product. And I mean, if we're looking at, EBITDA margins of, 18%, your margins are going to drop significantly going international. But maybe Jameson has a bigger logistics play, and they definitely have the expertise to make this happen at a more reasonable cost. There's some other slides I'm not going to go into. There's all financial stuff. Happy to share out these slides. This is all public information. But yeah, some interesting stuff there for sure. Let's take a look at some of the key considerations. All right, just to sum everything up. So the first thing, niche your product, but you want to be able to brand for mass appeal. We hit on that multiple times already, just because we want to be able to sell to the Costco, the Costco buyer, or the Costco customer, or the Walmart customer. Omni-channel potential, right? You're gonna probably have to be able to go into both channels, retail as well as direct to consumer or through online. And you have to be able to get through their retailer requirements. And this also happens with online. There are some online portals that, if you want to get onto their website so they can sell your product or have your product posted in there, they're going to have their compliance team ask you for some basic documentation. Margin and top line revenue are both important. With these larger organizations, they do put a lot of emphasis on top line revenue. And of course, we want to get there eventually, but also know that margin is so important for you to actually factor in, right? If you're looking at 19% margin now, just imagine what your margin needs to be when you start out. Knowing that your operation is fairly limited, you're going to have to hire more people, maybe hire out another distribution center, maybe switch contract manufacturers, maybe use a more higher quality manufacturer. So your costs are completely different, but this is super important. You really want to have healthy margins and obviously good top line revenue. Assume due diligence will happen. So if you are looking for that cash injection, if you are looking for an investor, if you're looking for acquisition, like I said, these guys have their people, especially the ones that know what they're doing, that have been in the supplement space for a long time, in the functional food space. They've seen all these issues before. So they've lawyered up, they've got their compliance team, and you want to be ready for that. And what I've seen happen in some cases is that for the brands that aren't ready for it, they, at the expense of needing that cash injection, especially if your margins aren't good, right? Like, if your margins aren't good, you can't keep yourself, can't keep the cash flow coming in properly and support your business. You're like desperate for money, right? And what happens here during the due diligence process is that they realize, based on the lawyer feedback or the investor feedback, that they have to make a ton of significant changes, either in formula, switch ingredients, maybe switch label claims, remove claims, change packaging. And what happens is you get this consumer confusion, but potentially consumer backlash, because they're like, wait, what happened? Like, why did you change all this? All this stuff that you said this product could do, why aren't you saying that anymore? Did you change the formula? And if so, why? Were you screwing us over before? And it, the consumers, obviously, there's a trust issue now, but also you may have to do such a significant pivot in order to get that funding that you're essentially abandoning your customer base, and you're almost starting from scratch. And so we really want to avoid all of that by making sure we factor all this in today and do all of these things and establish this early launch the right way, right? Making sure that we are being compliant throughout the entire process. So lots there, lots that we covered. And I know that a lot of you have questions about, how we could work together. What's the next step? All right, Brian, I've got this concept. I want to go find a manufacturer. What should I do now? And there's two options primarily. Okay, if we were to work together, or if you want to work together. So the first one is we could obviously book a consultation, a one-on-one consultation. It's 2 hours long. It can be split up into 2 1-hour sessions, and they don't expire. So if you want to do the second session like 3 months later, that's fine. But here we're going to tackle your concept, your formula, your label, identify any red flags, any regulatory hurdles, and then answer all your questions. All right. So that's a 2-hour consult. If you were to purchase that, it'll take you to our Calendly link. You can book a spot right away. The other way of doing this is through the Supplement Startup Essential Training. This is relatively new that we launched. So essentially what we've done is we've taken all the questions that keep coming up over and over again through these consults and built them into this training. And this allows me to kind of dive into these questions in more detail. Like 2 hours, you can burn through that pretty quickly. And so, there's a lot more in this topic. I really want to make sure that you can find a contract manufacturer, that you know what to ask for, how to review a certificate of analysis so that you can keep up, with these manufacturers and the talking quality and testing and all these things. And also, some of you might be building a budget right now. Maybe you're trying to build out your business plan. And we want to make sure that you know what's ahead of you and essentially give you this essential, foundational training so that you're ready for all the themes that we've been talking about today with regards to compliance and being investor ready, et cetera, et cetera. So this is online access. All the videos are this, like 5 hours worth of videos, if not more. We're constantly updating it with new content as well and tweaking things based on the feedback. And the feedback has been pretty good. Happy to say, I've been very proud of this program. And there's two ways you can purchase this. You can obviously pick the SET program on by itself, or you can combine it with the one-on-one consults. And if you combine it with the one-on-one consults, it's a better value because it's cheaper because there's a promo rate compared to buying the consults separately. One interesting thing I have to say about this, we had feedback recently from one customer, and this is this is one of the intentions of doing this, is that we want to make sure that, before you go too far down the road, that you don't get yourself into a scenario where you spend too much money into an idea that might not work. And that's one of the feedback we got from one customer. They did the SET program and they realized that their product wasn't viable. It wasn't financially viable or legally viable or what have you. But they were grateful in the sense that they were happy that they only spent a very, very small investment versus spending, a couple $1,000s in legal fees, setting up the LLC, branding, logo, or even worse. And I've seen this where they've lost money on deposit, like $7,000, just like that, because they put a deposit down with the manufacturer and realized the manufacturer wasn't the right fit. So something to think about. And feel free to reach out if you have any questions about this. Very good. So what's next? I think it's time for a Q&A if we've got some. And, the Q&A is always a fun time. I'm always enjoying this. And of course, you've got my email and our website address for more information. There's also the information in the channel. Right, we're updating putting new videos out as much as we can, when we can. We're trying to think of new topics. If you've got new topics, please let me know as well. We're always trying to find different ways to talk about FDA compliance, FTC compliance in a super fun way. All right, so let me know if you guys have any questions, and if not, well, then maybe we can get into the weekend much sooner than I anticipated. Oh, thank you. Demo File says, "Hi, Brian. Thanks for all the great content." You're welcome. And yeah, this is my first live stream, so hey, who knows how this goes, but we'll see. Thank you. I had fun doing this. And Jonathan, hello. Hey, Jonathan, hopefully you're still here and you're enjoying this, and maybe I get to see your brand one day. All right. Yeah, so it's been, it's been an interesting year. I think the year started with, there's been headlines of the recession and a downturn in the economy and interest rates going up. And we've been seeing this, issue across the board where, some of these retailers are pulling back on things. And as a result, these smaller brands are looking for that cash injection. They're looking for that investment. And it's not just one brand. I'm seeing it throughout. It's definitely an issue. And so we really want to make sure that that all these things will just be as simple as possible, that the transaction happens as smoothly as possible. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously incredibly stressful to do it, but let's make it one less thing you have to worry about. All right, Debophile says, "I have a question. I'm a very small company who can't afford lawyers. Am I safer going with the drop shipper?" So yeah, that is a good question. First of all, you should have money for a lawyer in your budget somewhere. That's number one. And again, the other thing is, what's the issue? Depending on the severity of the issue, you might need to go to a lawyer. If you're thinking about just general compliance, the drop shipper, typically, if you look at their contracts, they don't want anything to do with that. They just want to be a drop shipper, meaning they're just the warehouse, they store the product, and they ship it out when they see the orders. They don't want the compliance risk. Now, they should have some compliance programs and GMPs in the warehouse and know how to handle supplements and handle recalls, etc. But for the most part, in the fine print, they're probably going to make sure that they lean on you in terms of having the compliance component down. And so you can't really rely on the drop shipper to help you with those things. Now, lawyers are super not cheap, right? I've seen them in the 4-figure range per hour. And, if you want to go if you want to go cheaper, you're looking at $800 an hour, et cetera. And this is why my business exists. We're here to help support clients and make sure that they build out their compliance program out, even for brand owners. Even if you don't manufacture anything, all you're doing is like you sit in your cubicle at home, your workstation, and you're just kind of like quarterbacking everything through your DC, your third-party distribution center, your Shopify, and your manufacturer. You still need a quality assurance program, especially if your brand is doing fairly well. And that's just an FDA. There are some FDA requirements that you can't contract out, if you will. All right, this question is from Ella. Hi, Brian. Is there a need to patent dietary supplements? There's no need to. It depends on what you mean by patent them. If you're talking about a formula, like you want to patent, holy basil, ashwagandha, and ginseng at a specific ratio, you can't do that. It's like patenting like a cookie recipe or something like that. It's going to be really hard to do. I don't think you can. I would always recommend talking to a patent lawyer to guide you with that. You could patent the technology of how you created an ingredient. Like, for example, if you've developed a new ingredient, not necessarily the finished product dietary, something not like the finished good, but like the ingredient that goes in there, and there's a special technology, you can patent that. But if it's just a formula, it's kind of hard to do that. Some people typically would patent or trademark their brand name, a tagline, maybe like they'll give their product blend a fanciful ingredient or patent a fanciful name, like Brian's. I'm making this up. Extreme Rapid Blend, or Energy Blend, or something like that. I can trademark that name, and that might protect you a little bit. But a lot of brands do it, and I don't know if that's the type of protection you're looking for, but there are some options, and ultimately you definitely want to speak to a lawyer about that. Good question. All right. Hi, Brian. Thanks so much. I'm just getting started and taking your course. Awesome. I'm doing my market brief right now, but having a difficult time finding competitors. What would you suggest? Okay, interesting. So in the SSET program, we have various exercises. One exercise is creating the market brief. This is essentially like a brainstorm exercise on paper of who your competitors are, what your MSRP should be, what your competitor MSRP should be, why should I buy your product? It kind of just forces you to think of all of these things, all your claims. And it does two things. Number one, it obviously makes you do that exercise, which I think is very valuable in fully fleshing out your product, your brand, and what you stand for. But also it helps you have those conversations with manufacturers. You want to make sure that you just present exactly what you're looking for to the manufacturer. It makes the quoting process way easier. And so in this market brief, we force you to look for your competitors. In this case, it looks like from 9 to Thrive, just having some troubles finding that. So I would look at, if you can't find any specific competitors, just look for the category. So if you're in the probiotic category, just look at that. Just think of the scenario if I just typed into Amazon, like I'm a warm buyer, I go on Amazon and I feel like gut health, right? I type in probiotic gut health. That's what I will be typing. That's what I'll be searching for, whether that's Google Shopping or Amazon or what have you. It's going to pop up. And most likely, you probably have a sense of where your product is going to fit in there. And so right away, that gives you an idea of what your competitors are going to be, what they say, how they talk about it. I would start there. Ultimately, if you have zero competitors, that's always a good thing. I would argue chances are there's probably someone tangent to your product. But yeah, like it's definitely something to consider. And the other thing to think about is if you have zero competitors, it's good, but then it also, on the flip side, now you have to like educate the potential customer about your product, and there's that journey. But I would argue is I'd rather that than having competition. Also, I'm very nervous about marketing and making sure I don't have products sitting on the shelf. I would love to do a session with you about that, but have a limited budget. Do you have a payment plan? I currently don't have a payment plan. It's twofold. I think we try to make this program as affordable as possible. It's number one, and we've had issues with the payment processor that we've been using on the payment plan. As soon as you do that, I've seen a lot in the technical support groups. I've had some issues there, so we've really stayed away from it, unfortunately. Yeah, if you're really nervous about marketing and you're not sure if you can sell through your product, there's a couple ways we can do this. Number one is, the best before date. You see a best before date on a product. I don't know if this is even showing up. Essentially, it's a clock. It's a countdown, right? Once you slap a best before date, it's a countdown as to saying or implying that your product isn't going to be, good once you hit that date. So now you're against the clock trying to sell all this stuff. And one way to get around that, if you will, is you could use, instead of a best before date or an expiration date, you could use a packaging date, a PKG date, or a manufacturing date, MFG date. And so technically speaking, it's not saying when your product will expire. So it gives you some leeway. Now, you and I both know that a customer will ask you, how long is a product good for? And obviously you don't want product in the market that's 4 years old or something like that, but it gives you some leeway. I think we should definitely meet when you're ready, and hopefully the SET program may help you even further with that. But yeah, hopefully we get to connect in the future. Hi, Brian. What margin or discount do physical stores require in order to sell your product? Yeah, really good question. The big answer is wholesale price, all right? And wholesale price, you're looking at what, 40%, 50%? It eats into your margin pretty quickly. And so you got to be ready for that. Now, of course, there are exceptions, right? And maybe a mom and pop store will have lower margins and accept that for you. And that could be something that you may want to look for. But I always recommend just factoring that in, like just factor the worst case scenario. And that way you're just ready for it financially. Like, I would just hate for you to go in and realize, okay, we're actually making no money, even though we're now in all these cool stores. And I've seen that happen. And it's just all like show. You don't really have a real business ultimately, or at least you're incredibly dependent on investor cash injections, which I would hate. Very good question. Gosh, okay, we'll keep going. All right. Thank you. Okay, this is from Ala again. How can I protect my formula from being copied? Yeah, that's a good question. So ultimately, you can't. That is the real answer. All right. I mean, bear in mind, there are ways where you can label your product as a proprietary blend. I'm sure you've seen this in the market. And so they'll just say, Brian's proprietary blend, 1,000 milligrams, and they just list all the ingredients within that blend. You're allowed to do that. And that could be one way, so that your competitors don't technically know what's in your product. But your manufacturer knows, right? Someone's ultimately going to know. Sometimes you have to reveal your blend from a due diligence standpoint or from a retailer standpoint. So it's going to get out there. And there's, ways of doing that, either through an NDA as an example. But ultimately, there's no real way to protect you 100%. I think that's why you probably asked about the patenting component. I would say that, where you're trying to protect yourself is through your brand. And there's other ways of doing that, but I think that's probably the strongest way. Once you build that trust, people connect with you, you know how to speak to them, you know what your customers are connecting with, they're connecting with your message. That's probably going to protect you more. I don't think if Brian decided to create an AG1, BY1 formula, no one's buying that. All right. Even though I see on AG1s, I can see all the ingredients in their packaging. I can do the exact same thing, even though I'm not supposed to copy that dark green color and their logo. If I did, no one's buying it, right? There's something unique about the brand. And this is kind of why I say packaging is so important. Your brand, your value proposition is so important. And again, this is all the stuff we talk about in the market brief and the SET program, and gives you some ideas as how you can kind of insulate yourself from competition. Yeah, really good question. Twinkle Fire asks, how do you deal with potential misuse of a product? That's tough. It depends on the example. I don't know what you mean by misuse, but a common one, especially with like TikTok nowadays, you got kids that are, first of all, the kids, so they're under the age of 18. They're taking products that are meant for adults, right? And then they're doing some sort of silly challenge and misrepresenting your product. And they're just ingesting a crap load of it and could potentially harm themselves. There's really not much you can do. I mean, maybe you can label it appropriately. If you've been following the news lately, I think Prime, the drink, there was a news segment about how FDA is investigating them as a caffeinated drink. Is it appropriate for children? They're targeting young adults or teens, and FDA is looking into caffeinated beverages, in particular that particular brand. There's not much you can do. I mean, you properly label it. You could also look at different packaging requirements. If we're talking about little kids that could get into your product, there's ways to protect children, and then obviously a formula play. But there's only so much you can do, and if something were to happen, at least we can use that as a potential defense or rationale. Twinklefire says, in a nutrition facts panel for carbohydrates, do we need to include no more or no less than what is stated on the label? Don't really know what you mean there. I'm curious to know what you mean, but I think maybe you're thinking about like labeling it where you have the gram amount, and you want to say no more than X grams or no less than X grams than what is stated on the label. Well, FDA doesn't allow you to do that. There's specific ways of how you have to round the value and portray that on the label. And unfortunately, you can't say no more or no less than X grams. That said, FDA does give you leeway, right? They know that there's going to be variation in the nutrient content, and I believe it's like 80% to 120% of your label claim. So as long as you're within that window, you are okay. All right. I have a supplement company that was running for 20 plus years now, and I want to start up here in the States. Would you suggest I work from home and buy the machines or sub it out to a manufacturer? I would say if you are a very hands-on person and you really care about the product and how it's made and the formulation, how it should be in your mind, you have a really clear picture of what it needs to be, I would argue then buy the machines and use it for R&D purposes. Okay, so you can test it with your network, you can make samples, put it in a bottle, and really get a sense and hands-on connection with your product. And that's it, okay? After that, you take all that knowledge and the formula to the manufacturer and you have them sub it out. That said, some people try to attempt to make products at home, and I did a couple videos on that. The problem is, it's not really a problem. You can do it. Technically, you could try. It just really limits you to how you sell it, essentially online only, like your website only, and obviously at a small scale. But even then, like if you want insurance, right? If you want someone to insure you, give you liability insurance, they're going to ask you for GMP certification. And that's like a whole ball of wax. Like that's a completely different scenario. And FDA GMP requirements, there's a lot. Like for a typical brand owner, not a manufacturer, I could say you'll probably need about 20 SOPs or so, right? Let's just say roughly. I'm sure there's a little bit more. 20 SOPs, someone executing your QA program. And this is what we do. We are the remote satellite QA department for other brands. So we know what it takes to create this program. A manufacturer has way, way more SOPs just to meet FDA compliance. So it's a lot. And I think a lot of startups don't understand or haven't factored that component in, and hiring a consultant to write up the SOPs, maybe helping you execute. And those aren't cheap. And I'm not talking about my pricing. I'm just thinking the average consultant, you're looking at, 50 grand, 60 grand to get you started from a manufacturing GMP standpoint. And then you have to get it audited, get that certification so that you can get insurance. Okay, so lots there. Good question. All right. I think I'm going to call it. My voice is shot. It was a pleasure doing this. I look forward to the next one. I love all the questions. Hopefully you found this information helpful. And, I'm working hard at new content and also making sure all of my clients are happy and, taken care of at the same time. It was a pleasure doing this. I look forward to the next one. And until then, have a good one. Cheers.